when you think about what it means to be a man in this moment of time, the thing that is extremely troubling to me, and really this has been going on for at least a decade, is that when you think about manhood, or the sense, the mood that you get in society right now about what manhood is, you really get the sense that the overall mood is that manhood is something almost to be embarrassed about. We're told that manhood has been about things in the past that now, are no longer seen as helpful. Manhood in the past has been about repressing emotion. Manhood has been about being domineering and hierarchical. We get that manhood tied into this notion of the patriarchy a lot. We have notions of manhood that are tied into being aggressive and violent. And also about that it's been about demeaning and objectifying women. That it's been about taking unnecessary risks, about reckless drinking, and about sexual conquest and things of this sort. And this, of course, is hard to deny that manhood might have something to do with that, at least masculinity. Certainly we see in movies, in examples in our own lives, those types of behaviors from men. And even we recognize that they haven't been all bad in the past. Of course, in a society where you need warriors and more, and there is more violence in your society, then it may be really useful to have males around who repress emotions and who have a proclivity to being violent. But of course, times have changed, and we don't live in those kind of things. And so, manhood, sometimes the sense we get about it is that maybe it's a little bit out of date, I guess you could say. And so then this notion comes up that maybe masculinity period or manhood period is somewhat, especially today, toxic. We get this tie-ins with toxic masculinity. And of course, there's never a one-to-one saying like everything about males, everything about manhood is toxic. There's nobody or very few people saying something explicitly like that. But the feeling you get out there is that, some people are feeling more and more that maybe that's been the case all along, or at least is the case today, that manhood is just something inherently destructive in society, and we need to, if it's toxic, then we need to detox manhood today. And so you get these notions, like you go to some of the kind of modern manhood sites around, or you start listening to people kind of going out there and saying, this is what masculinity should be about today. This is what manhood should be about today. And you start getting these types of representations. They might kind of identify traditional masculinity first, this kind that's maybe a bit troubling to some people today. And then they'll say, so let's do the opposite of that. So if traditional masculinity was about being domineering, then modern masculinity can be about being more collaborative, right? And so men are encouraged to be more collaborative. And if traditional masculinity was about repressing women, then, the one I want to do first was actually repressing emotion. We'll get to women. If traditional masculinity was about repressing emotion, then modern masculinity can be emotionally expressive, and we can find empowerment, through males being more vulnerable and being comfortable with that. If traditional masculinity was about denigrating women, then modern masculinity can be about, catapulting women to the heights that they've been denied in the past. And if traditional masculinity was somehow tied up with domination and rape, kind of in explicit and implicit forms, then modern masculinity should be something that, when it comes to sexuality, seeks crystal clear, explicit, undeniable, and even written consent in any kind of sexual encounter. So all these things are fine as far as it goes. I mean, you can't argue that it's good to be able to express your emotions, to be collaborative, to respect women, to recognize that women have been mistreated and repressed in many instances in the past. So so these notions that of telling males to be like this today, it's hard to argue with that. Of course, those are good traits, but the thing that's once you've heard enough of that, they'll kind of forgive the average male for being left with the feeling that at the end of the day, this modern manhood, this modern masculinity that's being touted is devoid of a crucial element, and that would be masculinity. So in essence, this way that males are being asked to behave today, it just doesn't feel very masculine. It basically amounts to asking males to just act more feminine today. And again, that has its place, because all of us, and this is something I'll look forward to diving into a lot deeper in future streams, but all of us are made of masculine and feminine dynamics. I mean, the basic way I like to look at it is that there's all sorts of aspects of any given person. I mean, we have almost endless aspects of ourselves, and some of those are masculine and some of those are feminine. And so, the male that tries to act 100% masculine in every aspect of his character all the time is a buffoon, right? And in fact, there is no such thing as a purely masculine man. Even something like the Terminator, when we're presented the Terminator in Terminator 2, which I just recently watched with my boys, you have the Terminator there, and he's like, you could say, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's the most masculine man, but even in there, it shows the Terminator having a soft side, having, feminine aspects to him. So it's definitely the case that it's good for males to be able to develop femininity in themselves, because it's a core component of who they are. And so again, it's hard to argue that men should develop femininity in themselves. But again, when it comes down to it, even in our age of absolute, self-definition of who we are, an obsession with trying to eviscerate all the traditional categories, I don't think I'm mistaken that at the end of the day, the great majority of males today still want to have masculinity kind of at the foregrounded in their character and femininity backgrounded. In other words, I still think that most males today, the great majority in fact, despite all these options of the endless spectrum of identities and genders and things that are being presented to us today, I think the great majority still just want to be men. I could be wrong with that, and again, let me know if you think I'm wrong about that. But if I'm right about that, then our society, if our society is serious about encouraging people to develop the identity that they want to develop, then it's becoming to investigate what manhood really is. If this is what the great majority of males still want, then we need to know what it is. And we need to know what it has been, and we need to try to develop, an overarching definition and understanding that both explains what it has been and also, why we're struggling with it today. And so that is what this is all about, and maybe these next several streams. So any serious investigation like this would have to take a good hard look at what manhood has been across time and across cultures. And so that is going to be an integral part of this analysis. When you think about the number of societies and cultures that have existed throughout time, we already know there is such a variety of manners of living out there that still exist today, but they have existed over time. And especially with how humanity has developed, there's been quite a variety in terms of, there's still cultures out there that are still basically Stone Age cultures, even today. And of course, as the world modernized, there was, this great kind of cornucopia of different types of cultures out there. And so the nice thing is that those cultures were still out there, those societies, such that we could observe them a little bit and try to figure out how these different societies approached manhood. And so if, as there actually has been that kind of anthropological work done and taking a look at these societies, it'd be very interesting to know, does every society have a conception of manhood? And as it turns out, the answer is yes. Every single known society that has existed, that I've ever heard of, again, let me know if you know of an exception, has had both a differentiation at the level of sex, so they've had both male and female differentiation, but they've also had differentiation at a gender differentiation. So the primary differentiation between men and women, and that's been every single society that existed has had those as the main two categories. Now, interestingly, and this is one of those things, it's the exceptions that can oftentimes give you some of the best insights into this. There have been societies that have had a third gender, for example. There's a few Native American tribes. There's some places in Mexico. They're in Tahiti, for example. They've had a recognized third gender. Usually, it's been a male gender who dresses and acts like a woman. And it's been, usually it would be maybe about one person per town or large group of people. So it was an exception gender. But this person was an accepted and recognized member of society who played important roles in the society, and these people still exist. So, that's something very interesting to explore, and especially today, as all these things about gender and identities and whatnot is all just kind of up in the air at play. It's very interesting that that's existed, but it's never existed as anything but an exception, like a valued an exception, but an exception nonetheless. So that's an interesting feature as well. But anyway, getting back to this investigation, the best resource I've found that has looked at manhood in this way, and now that I come to think of it, I was going to try to have this book right here in my hands, and I may have left it downstairs. Let me just glance behind me here. It might be back here. Okay, it's not, so I'm going to have to have it next time. So the book that I've found that's been the best resource this way is called Manhood in the Making, Cultural Concepts of Masculinity by David D. Gilmore. And the reason this one is the best one that I've been able to find, because the whole book is nothing but him doing kind of a survey of anthropology that's been done from all sorts of different societies. So he says he takes examples from hunting and gathering bands, horticultural and pastoral tribes, peasants, post-industrial civilizations. All the inhabited continents are represented, and there are examples of manly ideals from warrior and pacifist societies, from egalitarian and stratified ones, and from matrilineal, patrilineal, and bilateral kinship systems. So he tries to look, of course he can't cover every society, but he tries to look at as many societies as possible, and varied societies, and see, are there patterns that emerge? So again, first, there is a pattern that emerges. All these societies have had a concept of manhood. And so going from that point then, given that every society has a concept of manhood, are there universal patterns to that manhood? Because if there are, that would be extremely interesting, because many of these societies clearly had not had contact with each other for thousands of years. And so many of these have been left to develop completely by themselves. And so it turns out that every single society has a concept of manhood, and those patterns emerge that are virtually ubiquitous across all of them. Then that suggests something inherent, something natural about what manhood is. And that actually will be the case. I think that there are those kinds of patterns as we dive into it, and that's exactly what we're going to be diving into. But also, interestingly, about manhood is there is a tremendous amount of variability. Okay, and so that is fascinating as well, because then it leaves you with the question, well, what is it? Is it something natural, or is it something that is constructed by each individual society? And to kind of skip ahead and give you a hint of what the answer is, I'm going to say the answer to that is yes. Two things can be true at the same time, and I think that's very much the truth with manhood, that it is something natural, but it is something that is natural for society to construct. And so in that construction, as societies kind of construct their concept of manhood, there are certain things which end up almost universal about the way that societies see manhood. And then there's other things that you're going to see are going to be particular to certain societies only, and not to other ones. And again, it's both the universal patterns that can tell us a lot about manhood, but it's also the exceptions, because then you have to look and say, why did this particular society have this strange concept of manhood where these other ones didn't? And if you look and you start seeing features that might make, provide some insight as to why it was like that with one society, it helps you form a better overall definition of manhood. So let's get into it. After I've read this book and literally spent about a decade combing the best stuff I could find about what manhood is, certainly, for example, the site Art of Manliness has done a tremendous job at providing a lot of these resources and pointing me to a lot of the best ones. But as I've surveyed this, I'm going to explain to you kind of an increasing, starting with a very abstract or simple concept of what manhood is, and then develop a more complex definition as I go on. And the weakness with how I have it today is that I haven't put in the actual examples of particular examples in societies of certain things that I'm going to talk about. So if there's any weakness today, which again, we may only go just a little bit longer today, it's that I'm not actually going to give you concrete examples that you can go and follow. So I will try to have that ready for tomorrow and not get too far into this without me being able to explain something and then offer you 3 examples of societies that have shown this kind of manhood. So today we'll just start with the abstract concept of what it is, and you're just going to have to take it on faith, I guess you could say, or wait for the examples. So in order to explain manhood here's one way to look at it. What I like to do is try to explain something as comprehensively as possible using one word, and then build from there. And so if I'm limited down to just one word to explain something as complex a concept as manhood, then that word is usually going to be something, or it's not going to be something like, it's going to be a symbol. You ask me, that gets into what is a symbol. And a symbol in the most basic sense is something familiar, something that we have a very good experience with. And so hence, for example, a mountain is one of the most ubiquitous symbols. And why is a mountain so powerful as a symbol? It's because we have all sorts of experience of a mountain. A mountain is, by its very nature, grand and bigger than us. And there's so many features of a mountain that we experience. They're difficult. As we climb them, we see more, etc. So anyway, a symbol is something that we're familiar with, like a mountain, like a tree, that you can look kind of through that symbol in order to understand something else. Oftentimes something that's very difficult to understand. And so we're going to be looking, the very first thing that I'm going to use to explain manhood is a symbol that we can kind of look through our experience with that thing in order to understand this more abstract concept. And so that symbol that the best one I can come up with so far is a fruit tree to explain manhood. And so the reason that is that I think manhood is extremely tied up with the notion of fruit. And if you think of fruit as it's used in stories, as it's used in in the scriptures, various scriptural traditions. Fruit is something of production. It's something valuable. And you think of the fruit tree, our experience with the fruit tree is that its very purpose, its telos, its reason for being is to create fruit. Okay, and so that, in a nutshell, is manhood. That manhood is a fruit tree, because manhood in and of itself is a concept that exists in order to create fruit. And we're going to say, well, create fruit for who? Create production for who? Before we get into that, let's look at a few more of the attributes of a fruit tree. A fruit tree is out there for everybody to see. It's out there in the public. It can't hide, in essence, its production of fruit or not. Either it's a productive fruit tree or it's not. And if it does have fruit, the fruit can be investigated. Is it good fruit or is it rotten fruit? Is it wild fruit? And if it's good fruit, then that fruit tree is valuable. And if it's not a productive fruit tree, or if the fruit is bad, then what's the fruit tree good for? It's good for nothing. And so if you look at manhood through that fruit tree, that has some of the core attributes of manhood. Manhood is a concept that exists to produce fruit. Okay, and the thing that is there to produce fruit for is for society. So manhood is inherently a societal concept. We're going to go into this more tomorrow, but manhood is not something one can designate. It's not a designation that one can give themselves. It's something that only a group of people, a society, can bestow upon someone else. And so how do you earn that status? Well, it has the right in the symbol. You produce good fruit for society. And if you don't, then what are you good for? You're good for nothing, basically. And interestingly, that is how society has always treated males who don't produce for the society. What do they end up being labeled as? Good for nothings, schmucks, scrubs. That TLC song, I don't want no scrub. Scrub is a guy who can't get no love from me. If you aren't doing the things that manhood, the fruit that society is calling you to produce, again, you're good for nothing. And the sad thing is, the sad truth about manhood is that it is a difficult designation and not all measure up to it. Okay? So I like this symbol of the fruit tree for it because, yeah, it gets out those attributes, but it's incomplete because, of course, it's not just males that produce fruit in society. You could say women produce fruit in many ways too. And so we're going to need a more specific definition of what manhood is as we go along to really pull out what makes it different from womanhood. So this seems like a pretty appropriate stopping point for me today. I hope this has been helpful. Again, I haven't had, just because I'm so kind of wrapped up to this, so many things going on, trying to just make sure the stream is going right and stuff. I haven't been able to look great at the chat. I see there's some good stuff. So please leave me the chat. I will go through that. I want your feedback. I want your ideas. And I want to know if a particular idea really lands with you and you're just like, oh yes, that's so helpful. Please let me know that. And if something, if you disagree with something and you think you have a good, both tell me that you disagree with it, but even better, give me reasons, reasons that I can look into. And if you have good reasons, you'll influence me. You'll help me to produce, a better outcome out of all this. Okay. So yeah, I appreciate all those that already look like they've been, participating in the chat. I'm really looking forward to continuing on this at least for 90 days. That's my commitment. After those 90 days, my guess is it will morph into something maybe a little bit different. I don't know if I can do this every day, Monday through Friday, but I'm at least going to do it for 90 days. And after that, we'll kind of feel out together pretty much kind of the most appropriate way to continue that. And last thing I should say is that this is not I still have this great desire to produce the kind of polished, finished videos, video essays, where I think the bulk of you have probably found me from. I mean, when it comes down to it, most people have found me through a video essay that I did on Gladiator that isn't even available in the US in its kind of full form that gets most of the views because of copyright things. And then a story that I did on my father and my brother, who are airline pilots. A lot of you have found me that way. And then other videos that I've had on manhood. So I know that, and if I get requests and things, it's less for kind of the stuff that we show about the farmstead here and Mission Top, and more for those kind of things. So I've listened to that, and I want to do those, and have been working on that. And the difficult thing for me on that, just to give you an insight of why it takes me so long to put these things out, is because for about the last 3-4 years, I've been in this stage of life where I don't have to do anything. There's nobody, there's no boss, there's no business partner, there's nobody that's saying, hey, you better get that done, or else there's this consequence. You lose your job, or you lose a friend, or things like that. You know, I've been fortunate to be in a circumstance basically for the last 3 or 4 years of kind of a mini retirement. And so as a family, we've actually accomplished a lot. I mean, heck, we traveled around the world for a year. We made this all happen with Mission Top. We're out there every day with livestock and things like that. So there's certain things we have been able to get done, but all the while, I've wanted to get out these video essays. I love making them. I love getting them out, putting the ideas out there, seeing people's reactions to them. But I'll sit down, and when it comes down to it, they're difficult to make, especially to get all the ideas right. So I'll work on it, I'll make some progress. And again, then there's no, it comes down to there's no consequence. There's nobody telling me that I have to do them. And so I'll kind of, other life will take over. And anyway, so this streaming process and this getting in touch with you day to day is actually one of those things that I'm looking to make me get these things out more. Because if it's anything that gives me a kick in the pants, it's that I'll get a comment off one of those videos saying, hey, do you think you could make content like that again? You know, we've kind of been waiting for a while. And I'll be like, you know, it's a little sting to my soul, I guess you could say, because I haven't just buckled down and gotten those things done. But for a number of reasons, you know, now I think is the time that this is going to become kind of the major focus in my life. So know that those more polished videos are coming, and that I think they're going to be better than they ever have been because of a process like this, that I can get your initial feedback on things, hone ideas, and then make this finished product that will, you know, go out there into the, you know, we'll submit it to the great algorithm and see what comes of it. But hopefully other people will find it and be brought into this community. So thank you for watching today. Looks like we went about 40 minutes today, and we'll play with the time each day to kind of figure out a time frame that works for both you and me. Appreciate you being here today, and hope to see you back tomorrow. Okay, thanks a lot.